All right. No, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining this evening from India and morning from UK. Glad to have you here and host along with Ritu ma'am and Manish sir. I am Raghav. I'm an engineer by training, but turned into a healthcare consultant and realizing so many problems in healthcare to solve. And as we are getting into the increasing and more complex world, with technological advancement, cost pressures, more and more different types of diseases, challenges in therapeutics and all. There is increased pressure on the healthcare professionals and people working in this industry. And to help us navigate some of these challenges and these uncertainties, we have very esteemed guest speaker today here, Mrs. Reetu Raina. She comes not just from a healthcare, but also from a cross-industry background. She has played various leadership role in variety of firms, be it Amdocs, HDFC Bank, Godrej HiCare, or multiple other roles she has played in different capacities and started her own firm, Element Skills, where she's helping and working with healthcare leaders across the globe in navigating these challenges. So thank you, Ritu ma'am, for joining us today and sharing some light. We look forward to learn from you. Just to give a background, this masterclass is a part of a series which is brought by Manish sir and Healthcare Continuum in collaboration with Big Podium. We have this first masterclass today on adaptive leadership, which is the most important part to navigate these changes. And further down the line, we'll have other masterclass events. We have the next one coming on 9th March about mental health. And then soon after, there will be more topics announced. So we look forward to your participation in those as well. And please continue sharing your comments on the chat. We want to keep it interactive, and I'll let Ritu ma'am take over and share some light and look forward to learn from it. Ma'am, you're on mute.
So thank you, Raghav, for the introduction, and thank you, Manishji, for this great initiative to start and really do a thought process partnership with the industry leaders to take our industry as a whole ahead. Now, I want to take one small sentence from Raghav's introduction, though I do agree that we are in problems, but the objective here is not to talk about the problems, but really make a headway to the solutions. This is one. And second, coming back to the adaptive leadership, I would be taking, though I'm keeping in mind the context about the health industry, but I would try to make it industry agnostic also a bit. The reason being that when we have to really bring the thought process and apply it, the more industry background we keep, it becomes easier for us to execute the solution. And going back to the concept of adaptive before I actually jump into my presentation, it has been a concept more than a decade old now, started from Harvard by Professor Ronald Hafiz. And I want to talk about the context first. What are we operating from? And then get into the adaptive leadership and eventually see the connection between the context in which we are operating and how the concept of adaptive leadership can help us navigate. So with that, I would quickly want to share my presentation. One second, I think. So let me know once you see the presentation. So I'm good to start, Raghav? Okay, great. So thank you. So now, as I said, that I don't want to really jump into the topic of adaptive leadership. I wanted to really give you a context. Now, when I say I wanted to give a context, anytime in the in the present, when we want to make a breakthrough, it's very important to talk about a bit of a history, because history tells us very important things. History tells us about the patterns. History tells us also about the probability which is going to happen in future. So for a few minutes, I want you all to pause, and I want to start the journey which we are in this industry today, starting from 1980 onwards. And Eventually, when we reach to this stage of the intelligence era, then we will talk about why it is important to talk about the past and how is past connected to future. The whole technological revolution, AI and generative AI and machines learning and artificial intelligence, what we are talking today, it didn't happen overnight, and it is very important to understand how each layer was connected, and the connection of each layer will help us to navigate in future. I think the first part, what it started is that when industrial era started phasing out and the computer era came in the early 80s. And what happened, there was a machine who was able to compute, and eventually there was a parallel world getting created to the humans. Of course, at a societal level, people felt, oh, computer is another machine. They never could imagine that there would be something like chat GPT getting born over a period of time and competing with a human. But what came as an interesting, I would say, intersection was early 90s. In early 90s, if you recollect, telecom started taking predominance. The new towers and engines started becoming satellite towers, and worlds started connecting. And this gave birth to the third era, which was internet era. So what happened in the internet era, the power of computing got connection, got the power of connection. So eventually, what machines or computers could produce, it could reach larger set of the population in a very fast, quick, and easy way. And the simplest and the easiest industry we can relate to was the birth of the e-commerce. If we recollect late 90s, suddenly e-commerce boom happened. So what did it mean? It meant that computer is doing the work, internet is making the connection. Doesn't matter which part of the world, you find customer, you find supplier, you find a vendor. So eventually this really created a new world. And if you see anyone who had a knowledge, who had an idea, and if you look at the greatest companies today, whether Amazon, Google, they all were incepted during this time. So what started becoming powerful was not the capital. What started becoming powerful was an idea and knowledge, because when idea and knowledge had a connection of internet, it could really create wonders. Now, the another wave we saw was the biotech wave in 2012, when actually the scientists started mapping the genomes, and they had the genomes of all the human genes, and machines started becoming parallel to humans. And that is exactly where we are standing today. Now, why is it important to understand this context before we jump into healthcare or before we jump into adaptive leadership? If I look from 80s to 2020, what has changed? Any thoughts what has changed? If you can put into the chat box, what has changed? Any one word which comes to your mind, whether it is career, whether it is industry, whether it is, your own personal lives, what has changed since then to now? You can just put any, you think what you feel in the chat box. So, Raghav, you'll help me if I'm seeing any words in the chat box.
So there are responses around entire ecosystem, way of living, lifestyle, pace of change, which I put, machine learning, agility, tend I say agility, 9-worm pub social says responsiveness.
Okay, great. So I think thanks for the responses. And of course, all the responses are right. But I want to really go more deeper here than what you all have written. Actually, if you look at, we were in control of situation in 80s and 90s to a large extent. Today, we are not in control of situation, whether you talk about lifestyle, ecosystem, because the pace of the change is much faster than we can comprehend. Even the research says the readiness of humans for the change is much slower. The adaptation is much slower than the rate at which technology is moving. So now, what does it mean when I say this whole thing is changing? So I want to use three, I would say, anchors for today's discussion. And I want to give you an example from a technology industry before I get into the healthcare. As I said, The first is about the change, the speed at which the change is happening is much beyond our adaptation rates, which means things are not in our control. So expecting that someone would know the answers doesn't really exist. Now, what does it mean? It means that if I look at whole industry, irrespective of healthcare, IT, banking, or finance, there are three components. There is an operating system, there's a platform, and there's an ecosystem. And let me explain you what I mean by this. If you look at how many of you have used BlackBerry in their lives, any show of hands? Quite a bit. So I have used a BlackBerry. So I think quite a few of you have used BlackBerry. Now, BlackBerry doesn't exist today, right? Now, think about it. What happened to BlackBerry? Because BlackBerry was an operating system, it was not a platform. And the companies which you actually see today, which are continuing to exist, are the platforms, are the ecosystem. Let me take another example. Of course, it is not a great example to talk about Paytm because of the current situations. But if I keep aside for a minute the current situation, when Paytm started, there were so many banks already existing. Did you ever think that did those banks didn't become the best fintechs? Because they had all the financial understanding of the market. They had a huge, massive capital behind them. Why a person who was, actually taking investments from the others started a Paytm, or a Google Pay, which was a technology company, created a fintech? The answer is very simple, that banks were operating systems. They knew how to create efficiencies in the current ecosystem which they are managing. And that is exactly where the healthcare industry is today. And then if you would tell a bank that you have to create an ecosystem, of course, banks did create great platforms. And that is why you saw digitalization of money happened in terms of whether you take HDFC or ICICI, all the private banks, they created great platforms, which the government or the public sector banks couldn't. So they lagged behind, but they couldn't create an ecosystem like the Paytms and the Googles of the world. So eventually, why I want to give this analogy of an operating system, platform, and ecosystem is these are the three modes we can operate. If we operate in the current ecosystem, in our operating system, we can create efficiencies. We can create control for some time. And let me give an example. Today, when we see the ratio of doctors vis-a-vis the patients is less, let us have more hospitals. It is working in their operating system, because you never know how technology will take over. And if I go to the ecosystem of a smart hospital, maybe I don't need so many doctors. And then to an extent, we are operating in platform, because there are many technologies which are supporting these hospitals. So platforms do exist, but who will survive is the person who creates this ecosystem. I don't know if maybe any of you have read a book. There's a book by Salim Ismail. Salim Ismail was of Indian origin. He was the one who actually founded Singularity University, a collaboration between NASA and Google. So he has written an amazing book called Exponential Organizations. Many years back, I think it's more than 10 years, when I attended one of his lectures, he spoke the industries which would be disrupted in the future would be legal, would be finance, and would be health. And if you look at it, legal industry is already disrupted. Chat GPT is passing the legal tests. Banking today is no more a physical bank. You have everything on your app. And eventually, this is going to go to the healthcare industry as well. Now, imagine I have to move to ecosystem. That is a change in the context. But what am I operating in is the operating system. Now, if this change from operating system to ecosystem is actually a change which is adaptive challenge, and we do not know the answers to it, because we are dealing with here and now, and someone tells us, no, now you visualize future. And I will go back to the example of Paytm and HDFC Bank. And HDFC Bank those days would say, we don't have enough funds for experiments. And a startup suddenly becomes a fintech. Now, what does it mean? It takes me to us to the next slide. It means that we need to understand what do we know and what is the gap, which is our operating system. But the challenge is not the knowing doing gap, because if I have a knowing and doing gap, I can operate in my operating system. But the challenge is ignorance doing gap. So we'll focus on that. We'll talk about the need for adaptive leadership. As I said, if I have to move from operating system to the ecosystem, I have to have a new set of leadership. And then we will also talk about how we have to really do the evolution from current state to that state. And of course, the leadership online, that is the pain of the change, because change is not easy. And in the end, we'll talk about the few strategies which you can take away from today's class as the strategies to start at least thinking from adaptive leadership perspective. Now, so knowing doing gap. So as I said, when I give you a challenge that I need to have so many hospitals in the country and so many doctors in the country, it is that myth that the better execution and improving operations will accomplish the needed results. Example, government says have the 100 medical colleges in a year. I will have n number of doctors. So again, what is it focusing on? It's focusing on the efficiency and current operating system. It can help, but the challenge is much bigger than that. The speed at which I have to reach every nook and corner of the country, it's not possible only by operating system. We have to infuse technology and we have to think about the larger ecosystem to really create the value. Paytm could not be HDFC Bank, but Paytm reached nook of the corner in the country because they worked on something called ignorance knowing gap, which was maybe with the customer, which was with the ecosystem. And when we start focusing on the ignorance knowing gap, so we start dealing with the complex and significant challenges, which would mean how do I infuse technology in the places where I may not have physical presence? How do I connect the current ecosystem in the country to make a change? Again, there are chances of failure for sure. Let me give you an example that when there was a lot of addiction happening in US during 60s and 70s, and they were trying to deal with this gap. Whosoever would say that we want to eradicate this, society would start becoming enemy of that person. So it's a very tough and complex change because you're not talking the local people's language. You're talking something beyond that. So now, what does it mean for us, as a leader to move from level 1 to level 3? And when I say, and I want to here draw a parallels, and I want to draw a parallels between the changes in the industry and the leadership stages. When you talk about personal dominance in 80s, and I want to take the era of 80s, what was the king? Capital and the knowledge. So that is why how industry was driven. So people knew who had clarity, who had direction. They wanted to drive efficiency. They would tell people, now move forward, this is the direction and run. But eventually, when we moved into the 90s, what we saw a change from personal dominance to interpersonal influence. And I want to connect here. Computer meets internet. What happens? A network economy is born. What does it mean? It means a person with an idea or thought can create a great business. So it changes from personal dominance to collaboration. Now, leaders like companies which were created back then, whether Amazon, Google, or whatever, they actually saw what are the collaborations which can be done in the ecosystem to make this change happen. And when they were able to create this interpersonal influence, they were able to create the great companies, or they were able to create big economic strides. To a large extent, apart from tech companies or e-commerce, even the financial industry also adapted. That is how they were able to create the platforms. And I'm sure all of you will remember the era when people would say, oh my god, ATM is born, now we don't see a staff in the bank, what will happen, this is crazy. But no one is talking about that today. And we would say one bank cannot remove from the another bank. Today you can remove money from any bank. So that is how the world moved from the personal dominance to interpersonal influence. Now, if I take healthcare industry, and I'm really sorry to say we are still lagging behind. What does it mean? Because it's a very well-knit community cohort industry. When you have a community cohort industry, to create this interpersonal influence becomes a challenge because you do not see value in the cross collaboration and you want to create small sections of dominance. So because of that, e-commerce financial industry took a much higher stride or much higher leap here as compared to the healthcare industry. So we have still a longer way to go if we have to make a shift. We have to actually move to the leadership level 2 even before going to the leadership level 3. Now, what does the leadership level 3 mean? As I said, when we reached to 2012, we actually moved from network economy to the era where man and machine were working together. And recently I did a podcast where I was the host, the guest I had invited for my podcast was a lady who is leading a team of humans and machines together. It was an interesting podcast because she was actually talking and telling that how does she define the rules of the work when in her team she has 5 bots or 5 machines and 5 people. Now imagine this kind of change happening in the healthcare industry itself. There would be part which would be done by machines, there would be a part which would be done by humans. Then you have to move from interpersonal to the adaptive because you're not used to working into that. And going back to Salim Ismail's book many years back, he even wrote that will the medicine as a profession stay as it is today? And he said answer is no, because when your diagnostics, when your knowledge part would be taken by machine, what would be left to the humans would be only interpretations and connections. Now, as the humans, we love to stay in comfort and we say, okay, dekha jayega when this comes in. And this is exactly what happens with the banks. They kept thinking we are big, we have to settle our operating system without realizing when fintechs, boom, did on their face and they grew much faster than the banks. So now the opportunity is everywhere. Now it's up to us if we really want to stride with this or want to some technology to take over and maybe make us obsolete or dysfunctional. So what does it mean? It means we do not have a choice rather than really taking a leap and moving into this adaptive capacities. Now, before I get into the definition, what does adaptive mean? I want to give you 2 examples here. And the 2 examples are that when you talk about adaptive, it means as a leader, you do not have all the answers. You will depend on the collective intelligence of the people. And the risk of taking those decisions might be much bigger. Not a very good example, but if you remember in 90s when Shimon Peres and Rabi in Israel said, let's give a peace a chance. And what they were saying that we are ready to let go a piece of land for the peace. Imagine the kind of risk they were running. And Rabi was assassinated. So though you might want to really make the change, but there is a risk. And we have to sometimes balance that risk with the reward. The second is the concept of the authority changes because now it is an interrelationship dialogue. Maybe the junior most doctor who has been dealt with the technology in your staff would have much better answers than you have because he is a digitally native. And then at that point in time, it challenges your core concept of leadership. How do I do not know all the answers? And in the adaptive capacities, everyone learns from each other. Now imagine the most, I would say, senior or experienced banker did not start a Paytm. A technologist starts a Paytm. So it is as simple as that. Maybe the person who is not even from the industry, but who is digitally native or who has a different world will be able to give you much better answer. And we have to, as a leadership, our position is not I know it. Our position is how do I leverage on this collective intelligence? Everyone must adapt their perspective to emerge to a solution. It's not my solution is right or Raghav's solution is right or Manishji's solution is right. It's no one's solution which is right because everyone holds a piece of information. What is adaptive capacity is how do I hang on to each piece of that information and take it ahead as a collective solution to the problem. Now, the shift it really brings is it talks, when we talk about a leader, we say that he should know all the answers and we have an inappropriate expectations of the authority. It says no. The biggest shift it brings is leader does not have all the answers. And imagine a leader gets his power by the knowledge or by the information he or she has. And suddenly you tell him, look, you do not have all the answers. So here, the power of the leadership is not from knowing the answers. The power of the leadership is how is he able to build on the adaptive capacity of the people and create that solution in that room, which might be based on anyone who is much lesser in experience or authority. Now, adaptive capacities is a very, very important one because as a leader, you do not have answers, but you are helping people to navigate through this change. And what happens? You're asking them, you're challenging them, look, this what you have been doing doesn't work. You have to make a change. And again, giving example of Israel, if you look at it, they told people that we always wanted this piece of land that we have to let go. Now, what does it mean? It means you are asking them to let go their own values and you are telling them deal with unknown for a while. There is a collective solution. It's not Ritu, Raghav or Maniji's solution, which is the right solution. It's a collective solution of all of us. So it's a big adaptive capacity. Now what happens to people, they have nothing to hang on. I know a way of doing things, so I can hang on to that. But someone tells me, oh, this doesn't work. To what I will hold on to. So the leadership role is what they make people hold on to. Now, what becomes very important is that not to identify every problem as adaptive problem. Identify what is an adaptive problem, where I need to deal with the concept of adaptive and what is a technical problem. Now, a technical problem is a problem where you have answers and you know a solution. I have a fever, I take a crocin, it's a technical problem, right? So you have an expert who can give you the answers. Now, going back to the first slide, if I have a challenges in the operating model or operating system, I can have a technical expert. I have to expand and create, 10 hospitals in a region. So I know who will help me in creating the SOP, putting the machines in place, helping to get the staff. This is expert answer. So technical problem, I can have an expert answer. But I can have a problem where I have a mixed group. It's adaptive plus group. So like I have to create hospitals. Now I have to ensure I have only this much of resource and I want to make healthcare to reach every tip of the state. And I do not have that much money to put the infrastructure and everything in place. How do I make this change happen? Maybe. So here I have the answer that I can put up some places and I will have experts. But how do I ensure I meet each part of the region? And I want to really take an example of this, mixed group adaptive challenge, what Sonam Wangchu actually did in Ladakh. When he had to really create the concept of the education there, he didn't have people to lead that. So what he did is he built the adaptive capacities. He went to people and he told them, the young people, what is the solution? How do we really make you all educated in Ladakh? So eventually, with few experts, he created a group who started working on those problems and who became the brand ambassadors. And then the third is the adaptive, where we all do not have answers. And I want to give an example and going back to slide one. If you ask me in this room, how many of us really know how to go to stage 3 in healthcare, which is the ecosystem? Does anyone feel confident that they can in a jiffy move from an operating system to an ecosystem? And while as there is a I would say half built platform. Any thoughts? I will pause here before I move to the next and very critical slide. I want to hear people. Do you feel that we today in healthcare industry have the answers where we can move from our operating system and directly jump into the ecosystem? You may unmute them, Raghav.
Yeah. Feel free to unmute yourself and font.
Do you think that, my question is, do you think that in the healthcare, if we have to move from an operative to the ecosystem, we have all the answers?
Tenda, you shared some response. Do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, if you can just read it out to me.
now here near.
Thank you. I think we are very, very far from that, because it's about changing the mindset. I think we are still stuck in the
Operating.
in the first stage. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Anyone else? Do you think that we are still, in the operating and kind of a platform, but we have the answers to the ecosystem? Before I actually go, what are the challenges to move to the ecosystem? Thank you for your comment.
Please feel free to unmute yourself and share your thoughts. Maniji, any thoughts from your end?
No, Raghu.
Okay, great. So I think we have the one comment, and which is great, that of course we are still in the stage one, which is the stage of operating, and to move from a stage of operating to the ecosystem, we still have a long way to go. Now, this is the place where I really want to spend a bit of a time. And as I told you, we have, where is the challenge? Why don't people want to move to that ecosystem? And I think the biggest challenge is that when you are working in an operating system, you have a technical problem and you start dealing with the technical problem. But when you start moving from that technical problem of an operating system to maybe let's take an example of a platform for a minute. If there is something as humans, what is our tendency if we do not know anything, what we will do? Procrastinate, right? We start avoiding it. I will do it later. So eventually, this work avoidance starts as the problems start moving away from technical, and it starts going to a what you call in adaptive leadership to the dangerous zone. And what is that dangerous zone? This light green part. Because this is the part where you are experimenting. And when you are experimenting, the chances you will be successful or not successful depends a lot on many things. Example, I don't know if there's anyone from Hyderabad. When the Chandrababu Naidu wanted to really create Hyderabad as a high-tech industry, right? And he was inviting people all across to come to Hyderabad and set up their own shops there, including Microsoft. So there was a resistance. And who was resisting it? The local people that it's going to impact and the opposition. It worked well. And what does it mean? It means that he was able to cross this limit of tolerance and it gave him success. This is a good example. Now, another example, as I gave you about Yitzhak Rabin, who was the Prime Minister of Israel, he said, let us give peace a chance, right? So he was moving from a technical problem to create an adaptive solution, which is long-term and which will help the country. When he tried to do that, what was the first challenge he faced? Of course, people didn't accept, but he started agreeing to the people. Shimon Peres was with him. Eventually, when he did that, people started moving with him. The people who were not with him, they could not kill his concept, but they started rallying against him that he doesn't want to do good for the country. So imagine the risk he was running as a leader. So leadership is not always a position of popularity. It's not a position where everyone will like you. And he went through that threshold. But what happened? He was assassinated before the limit of tolerance. But eventually, if he would have crossed it, it would have created a new world order. It would not have the chaos which it has. Now, what is important for us as leaders is to identify that if I have to take the risk, how do I balance it with the reward? What does it mean? If we are operating in our own industry with the first stage, which is the operating model, let me encourage the platforms and let me create the ecosystem. If you look at what is healthcare continuum trying to do, it is actually working on the stage 3, which is creation of the ecosystem, because people from various facets of the healthcare industry is coming together, and someone says that I can provide you X, Another one says, I can provide you this expertise. And eventually a collaboration can be created. And maybe it is not a risk of one person, it's a collective people who take a risk and help in creating that ecosystem. And it happens in one part of the state. It becomes a successful POC. As you know, High-Tech City of Hyderabad became a successful POC. And it starts replicating at other places. But just think about it, even creating the ecosystem, we need to bring people together. And that is an effort which is happening today. And even in bringing people together, we need to really give them what is in it for you. So, what it becomes really very important is that how do I identify if my problem is a technical problem? The moment I identify, I give it to the operating model. The moment I see it is not a technical problem, I start increasing my adaptive capacities to deal with it rather than going to work avoidance, because work avoidance will only and only keep me in my operating model. And then eventually after that I start moving to creation of the ecosystem. So this is very nicely written in the book by Hafiz and Lewinsky, where they talk about leadership on the line. And one of the examples they have given about this threshold is eradication of drug abuse in Americas in 60s and 70s. And when they say that, people would say, the people who would try to really push the people to move away from it, they would be secluded, they would be isolated, they would lose their social life, because they felt that they are asking us to move away from something which we are used to, and there was always this avoidance coming in. But eventually, slowly the change starts happening. But our problem is much bigger than those 60s and 70s problem, because we are not only competing with ourselves today or humans, we are actually competing with a real parallel virtual world. And if we will not change, this virtual world will take over us very soon. Imagine today the power of the generative AI and the power of computing. It is learning on its own, and it is becoming intelligent day by day. And today I feel I'm still stuck with MBBS, MD, and 2 years of experience, and there's a machine who gives me amazing diagnostics quickly. And I think this hit us very hard in our faces when suddenly Chat GPT came. And coming of Chat GPT was equally the same way as Google in late 90s or early 2000. So here, the price which we will pay for not building our adaptive capacities could also lead to our extinction. Maybe not the extinction of the people who are in their mid careers or the late mid careers, but the extinction of the people who will come next. So, what becomes our role as leaders is how do we really start moving from the stage one, which is operating models, to the stage three, which is creating an ecosystem. Now, why do people not want to go this way? Because if it is a great way, people should go this way, because there is a loss, and I have given you enough examples. People, if they feel they are not loyal to me if I make a change, because they are hung by their own values, people start feeling incompetent, because in my stage one of the leadership, I should know all the answers. And if I do not know all the answers and I feel incompetent, I really don't think much about myself. And that is the why people resist, and they don't want to take up the adaptive challenges, and they don't want to, the HDFCs and the ICICI banks of the world do not want to move from the platform to the ecosystem. Someone else comes and takes that ecosystem to the next level. And so the question is, am I as a leader ready to challenge that status quo? Am I as a leader ready to move forward to the future, which if I will not seize, someone else will come and take it from me? Now, of course, I have scared you enough. Now, before I scare you or freeze you anymore, I must tell you, how do you do in your day to day? What are the recommendations from the research which say if I have to really become an adaptive leader, I may not become, Rabi or Shimon Peres, but in my own small ways, how do I do things so that I am making an incremental increase towards building the adaptive capacities?
The first one is, the concept of get onto the balcony. What does it mean? When we are all sitting on a dance floor, we are a part of the dance floor. We are a character in that. And we associate ourselves with the dance floor and the participants in the dance floor. When we start moving away from the dance floor and we start getting into the balcony and we see future, which is above this dance floor, we actually see, okay, if I continue making hospitals at this rate, if I continue perfecting the art of efficiency and effectiveness, I can create hospitals which might become obsolete over a period of time. Will it make sense for me? So this is what balcony views tells you, because balcony is able to tell you how is the pattern going on to the dance floor. And the moment you disassociate yourself from the dance floor, you are making an emotional disconnect with the dance floor. You are able to see things objectively. So your fear that I am the leader, I should know the answer, goes off. So that is the strategy number one. Balcony may not be a physical balcony, but psychologically in your teams, in your groups, move away from that dance floor and start looking yourself also as a character on the dance floor and see where it is going. The second is think politically. When I say think politically, to win a war, you have to survive. You can't kill yourself and then say, oh, I have sacrificed. So you have to create, when I say think politically, you have to actually create a right balance between reward and, reprimand or loss and reward. So what does it mean? If I take much bigger risk, which might kill the entire ecosystem, let me hold it on. Let me start moving incremental things. What does it mean? Maybe there are two big entities who will have to collaborate and it will kill you as a person. Don't talk about the collaboration at that level. Start injecting few systems in the company which will start making you future ready. Maybe the technology, maybe bringing new processes. So if you start thinking politically, you will survive and you will push the envelope in a more smarter way rather than getting, dying in the threshold part, which I showed in the earlier slide. It's not an easy journey when you become an adaptive leader. So you feel many times giving it up. The mantra is hold steady and focus on the goal which you want to achieve, because there will be a lot of frustration which you're coming. Imagine there is a road which is going from south to the north, and everyone is running in that direction. Suddenly you start coming from north to south. What happens to you on the way? So everyone says, oh, Raghav, are you okay? You're going in the opposite direction. Is all well with you? The first person. Then you meet the second pedestrian. He again says the same thing. Then you meet third pedestrian. When you meet fourth pedestrian, you start realizing there is something really wrong with me. There are 4 people who are telling me I'm going the wrong way, right? So imagine going back to the banks and the Paytm, which is an example very close to my heart. If there is an X million a bank was spending on the fintech and it is not getting results, and there are 4 investment bankers within the bank telling him, are you okay? Why are you spending so much? What is this fintech all about? What is going to happen? Nothing will happen. We are a huge bank. So after 3 or 4 people tell him, he starts believing it, and he doesn't ask company for more investments into that. And suddenly the fintechs like GPay, Paytm, BharatPay are born. So hold steady, because you are doing something which is not usual, which is not everyone is moving there. Manage your hungers. We are all humans at the end of the day. And at some times we become greedy and we feel that, if I do this, what am I going to gain out of it? I'm not getting the central position. I'm asking the least, experienced person in the group for the answers. Is that right to do? So your own personal hungers can sometimes become a roadblock for you to move forward, because these hungers will tell you, come on, don't experiment, show your leadership, give the answer. I recollect we had done a workshop many years back when I had I was asked to present the case study around adaptive leadership in Singapore in ECUF. And we did a small exercise. We had all the leaders who were mainly in HR from different companies like Microsoft, Oracle and all that. And we did a small exercise. We gave them what you call as a case to solve, and we asked the answers, and they, with the half information, and they were looking at me and asking me the answers, and I said, I do not have the answers. I didn't even say I do not have the answers. I stayed quiet. My quietness for 5 minutes frustrated them to the extent someone, he removed his blazer, he threw it on the floor. What are you doing? You are not giving answers. So, because being a facilitator in the room, I was the leader and I had to manage my hungers. No, I do not know the answer. You know the answer. You find it out for you. Because he was challenging my authority by removing the blazer and saying, what the hell are you doing? You're not giving me the answers. So these are the hungers. Our hunger to show our dominance, to be in the center, will push us to give the answers. Adaptive capacities, hang on, get the answers from them. It's a lonely journey. Anchor yourself, because it's not the path you are going which everyone is going. And sometimes within your own mind and your own brain, there would be a conflict. It's very important as an adaptive leader to anchor yourself, because if you will anchor yourself, you will dig your feet deep to the ground and you will not allow yourself to get moved away with any wave which comes in. So if we really, first of all, uh, identify clearly what is adaptive challenge, what is a technical challenge. Remember, if you are in the stage one, maybe you can go Raga. Sorry, it's the slide is with me only. I'll just go to because I want to summarize, and I want to summarize with that one. Just allow me a minute. Yeah. If I am in the operating system, there are challenges which can be dealt with the technical thing. Let me do with them with the technical thing. If there are challenges in the ecosystem, I need to move away. I need to have the adaptive capacities. And there I need to apply the concept of the adaptive. And there I have to really focus on what are those adaptive challenges. And to bring those adaptive challenges, I have to apply this methodology. And of course, it will not come overnight. It will come with its own pace. But just think about work avoidance, dealing with technical, avoiding what is adaptive. What is going to happen? The change will come on our face like a tsunami. And maybe it will even disrupt our operating systems. So I think that's all I have to say. And before I close, I can, ask if there are anyone who wants to talk about any adaptive challenge he or she is facing, and we can just discuss that, or we can take questions, whatever you feel right, Raghav and Manishi. And I will pause here.
Yeah, there are some comments over chat. Shiji is replying, hold and grow, summarizing the adaptive capacity. But
Maybe they can unmute themselves and we can take one or two questions,
Ashish,
Raghav.
yeah.
Yeah.
Ashish, did you want to unmute?
Maybe I can stop
Yeah,
sharing.
right. So can you hear me, everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So my question was like when you asked about like the current stage you think you are into your initiatives. So I was thinking more of holding and grow because I was looking at the chart you were presenting and that was the more suitable stage I found myself. And I had question on because when you start doing some initiatives and then at the next moment you have to think politically because there are so many factors which comes into the play and thinking politically is like something which is making me more curious like how that is like more relevant in having adaptive leadership as a direction to proceed on.
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Prashant. I think what is important is that thinking politically is important from two perspectives. When I say thinking politically is about, if I go to the naive adaptive leadership concept, I will not think politically. I will say, okay, let me build the adaptive capacities. Everyone is going to north to south. I will go south to north. But eventually, in the process from going to the north to south, I'm just taking a very, I would say, very raw example. Everyone is stabbing me and saying, hey, Ritu, you're doing wrong, you're doing. And after the fifth stab, I am down on the ground. Now I say, what is the risk if I want to do this change whole hog, or I want to do this change incrementally? Because if I will do this change with full force, I might kill someone in the process. Might as well do a balance of reward and risk. I think you are saying something, but you're on mute. Okay. So I think that becomes really very important, that when I say thinking politically, is thinking in a way where I can afford to take the risk and where I can afford to take incremental risk, because risk and reward has to be balanced. Sometimes the reprimand will become bigger than the reward, and I will not be able to go to the large extent. So that is what I meant by saying thinking politically, which is basically, if I have to give it a better word, it is balancing between the reward and the reprimand or the loss which I will get.
Right. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question, maybe in that, like in the balancing trade-off, where do you see leaders currently stuck, ma'am, in your experience working with leaders?
See, I cannot give you a black and white answer, Raghav, but I think one thing is very, very important. As a leader, you are not your responsibility. The people around you is your responsibility. So when the people around you is your responsibility, so eventually you will push yourself to move into that direction. Because imagine if we will not make these corrections or these changes now, what will happen? Maybe the jobs will go off. Maybe the people will not be, there is a study which says by 2030, there would be 350 million people who would need reskilling for the new set of jobs. Now, as a leader who is in a very responsible position, if I have not thought about this adaptive challenge, not invested in the reskilling or the skilling or changing my systems, which is causing me a lot of pain because my system about doesn't want me to do that, then I will not, be holding myself true to my own people, because at the end of the day, as a leader, it's not about me. I hold the responsibility of so many people on my shoulders, and these adaptive changes are painful. And for when you are driving these painful changes, you have to really anchor yourself.
Yeah. No, thanks for answering that. We have a question from Tenda. Tenda, do you want to?
Thank you very much for your presentation. So it's a comment more than a question. So in the healthcare, I don't know how it is for you, but here in the UK, I see healthcare is as political, so that we have a different culture in healthcare. And sometimes, like, I've been informed, I've been enlightened, but how do I actually influence? I'm kind of a middle manager. There's lots of people above me. And, like injecting this kind of new way of thinking, adaptive leadership, is challenging because, healthcare system is just so political. So, I just need any thoughts, any ideas from anyone.
I think, if I would have done more deeper session on the adaptive leadership, which runs like a workshop. So this is amazing question, Tendai. First of all, I must say, because this is not your question, it was everyone's question. It's not about the government and the politics. That name and the form changes in everybody's context, but there is a body above us which is governing us. So, we do a case study around it, and what we talk about is that if we have to really build our adaptive capacities, we have to create two types of bucket lists. When I say two types of the bucket list is, what are the things I still have at least 50% or 60% influence, and what are the things I have 0% influence? The places where I have even less than 50% or some percentage of influence, I start pushing envelope for those things, because they start becoming a small change makers within the larger ecosystem. And it goes back to thinking politically as well, because they do not risk me, because if I am risked, I will die. Now, the challenge which most of people face as humans is, understanding the situation from you, which you are coming, Tenda, is that people start thinking, let me go to the avoidance and not kill myself. So my recommendation and humble request is, don't go to avoidance. Venture there. Venture with slow steps. Create a list where I have even less than 50% or less than 30% influence, but some influence, and start making those small changes in whatever form and fashion you can. Because psychologically, what happens is when we go to the avoidance, we give complete control to the larger political ecosystem, which eats up us eventually. This is my thought. Anyone can contribute here, please. You're all professionals and from healthcare. Maybe you will have even better ideas.
Please feel free to unmute and share your thoughts, comments, ask questions.
So actually, your just last reply actually gave me solution also. I was into a product business where the product is not a regional product; it is always a global product. Like in healthcare communications, particularly research communications. So whatever we publish, it is a global article, anywhere people can read. So, and global bodies actually they take care of the ethics and guidelines and policies how to proceed further. Whereas most of the things are okay, but there are something which need a regional perspective where no regional initiatives, major initiatives have been taken yet. But so till that duration, where we can communicate, we can collaborate with those global partners, we always remain, most of the time we remain in risk avoidance, work avoidance, but in that stage and just continue to sustain at that duration. But as you mentioned, just the last question reply, work avoidance is not a kind of proper solution. So we must find the ways where we have our influence in a shorter mode, even shorter duration, shorter network even, and then slowly, gradually, we can increase our networking in that context, and we can, set that benchmark, or maybe we can provide our ways, or maybe our suggestions. So I've got my solution. That is something I wanted to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think so. It was a great answer, and you actually gave the real data for a question where I kind of gave a theory. So I think, Raghav, we are on time.
We are on time, yeah.
You make any closing remark or anything before we...
Thanks again for such an enlightening session. A lot of great energy in the discussion and learning so many concepts about adaptive capacity. And I can see Tendai clapping and a couple of other comments as well. Please feel free to share your feedback and comments on the session, and reach out in case of any questions. We'll be happy to connect. As a closing part, I would say we should all continue to make, I think someone summarized in the comment itself that little change will hopefully have a ripple effect. That's an excellent statement. Thank you again, Reetu ma'am. And just for everyone's knowledge, we'll be continuing this series of masterclass. I'll send you the details over email on the next masterclass. If you're interested, definitely register. The next one is on mental health, and then we'll have other topics coming on every 2 weeks, every Saturday, 4 to 5 p.m. IST, 10:30 a.m. GMT. So really, really nice of everyone to join, and looking forward to it. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Manishta.
Thank you, everyone, and have a
everybody.
great weekend. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.